Okay, so our PCT training, first is patient, it goes into sort of safety, and it goes into patient abuse and neglect. Again, outside, sort of probably, I hope this is outside of where you're familiar with, but we have elderly abuse. Everybody's heard of child abuse, right? You know, but we have elderly abuse. The parents or kids, they don't want to put pops in a nursing home, but they have no problem in locking them in a room in the back of the house and not feeding and giving them water. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience, or allowing them to live in soaked urine and not taking care of them. But we don't want to put them in a nursing home or a place that there's someone that's paid to take care of them, right? Anyhow, think about that. I hope it's much later in your life. But if you're going to take care of your parents, take care of them. Okay? So we'll look at physical abuse, verbal abuse. Sometimes this does take place in the long-term nursing facilities. They have patient verbal and physical abuse. So when they come to the hospital or a doctor's appointment and you're taking care of them as a doctor or a nurse or a therapist or whatever that you're doing, then you would look for signs of abuse. Bruising, okay? We call it, it's an old term, so I don't know if you're cowing down. You know, like if you have a dog that you beat this dog all the time, and that dog comes up to you, they're going to cow down. They're going to do this to you. All right. I had this patient one time that he was bedridden. He had a lot of mental problems. He just wasn't. He was stuck in bed. He couldn't function on his own. He required his mother to take care of all his needs. Okay. We'd go in and pick this guy up, and the house would be spotless. And we're looking around for this guy. Let's call him Bob. Looking around for Bob. And where's Bob? We open the door. We go down this long hallway that is frigid. It's like, wow, there's no heat back here. And then we open Bob's door, and the smell of urine just takes our breath away. I mean, it smells worse than the boys' bathroom at the end of the day. I mean, you're just sitting there going, wow, that ammonia, real strong ammonia smell. Can't even hardly breathe in it. Then we go down there, and Bob hears his mom's voice, okay? And he does this. And from his mom, hearing his mom's voice. He would respond to us. We would talk to him, and he would look. But his mom, he would do this. What do you think Mom's doing? Yeah. You might see it in when they come to the hospital and they check the patient in. They're going to ask them, hey, do you feel safe at home? Okay, do you feel safe at home? Are you being abused or neglected at home? In the elderly, right? They're going to ask this because it happens all the time. I've picked patients up that they refuse to give them water. You know, they were begging. We picked this man up, really nice man up, and he was begging for a drink of water in the back of our ambulance. And it's like, man, I'd give you water, but we don't carry water. We carry saline, that's salt water, and he was begging for water, Me, I wanted to jump out of the ambulance and go talk to their kids. Not in a nice way, in a physical way. But I wanted to keep my job, right? So, but this nice man, and they called it 911. He did have a UTI, had a horrible UTI because they weren't giving him any water. But they wanted to go out that night. That's why they called 911.
Are you serious? What?
Yeah. They wanted to go out partying. They called 911 to pick him up to take him to the hospital because they thought they would keep him overnight. So, anyhow, when you look at this could be career ending as well. Abuse your patient in any form. We talked about this in the earlier part of the year, right? So then on the same lines, it gets involved in sexual harassment of your patient or the staff, okay? It's a career-ending move. It's definitely a job-ending move, okay? They will fire you over sexual harassment faster than anything, okay? I've witnessed it with sexual harassment on the student. So they fire the guy the next day, you know? So be careful. Look at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. It's on the website. I've actually copied it and pasted it to my syllabus for my other EMT classes so they understand what sexual harassment is. And it is just creating an environment, okay, where the person feels uncomfortable. Suggestions or environments or jokes. There's a list of things that falls under that, okay? So be cautious of that, okay? Because if you may already know medical people are jokesters, right? We talk about anything, but you have to be aware of what you're talking about, right? So do that. Don't create this hostile work environment. We've also talked about this as well before. Substance abuse, okay? The medical field is full of it. You know, I mean, I can think of probably 30 people that I've worked with off the top of my head that are divorced in healthcare. And they're divorced because one, I don't think they know how to handle stress right, okay? But two, they may have substance abuse problems. In EMS, we work 24-hour shifts, so we work 7 a.m. to 7 a.m., right? It is not right to get off at work at 7 a.m. and get drunk. That's a problem, right? Okay, you should go to sleep. You've probably been up all night. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to lecture you over drinking and drugs, but I'm telling you that healthcare has a lot of problems with stealing patients' medications, stealing narcotics from work, taking narcotics. So it's a big career-ending thing that takes place, and you just don't want to do that. You want to stay clear of that. Learn to handle your stress healthy. You're going to have stress. You guys have stress now, right? Grades and everything else. Probably most of it's parent-induced, but you have stress now. So learn to handle that healthy stress reduction. And said we just spoke of this domestic violence with patients or family. We see that all over the TV news now. Okay, so watch that. If temper's the thing with patients, remove yourself from the patient, right? If the patient's calling you everything in the book, remove yourself. You don't have to take that. Remove yourself from the patient. Go tell your supervisor. As a PCT, if you go in there and the patient's calling you everything that could be, go inform the nurse. The nurse is going to call security. If they're sexually harassing you, then they'll call the police. Right? If they physically assault you, then they've assaulted a public servant in healthcare, and that's a felony. So they're going to call the police and they'll file charges. Yes, I've seen it. So the police come up, they'll take a report, and as soon as the person's out of the hospital, they'll file charges on them. Okay? So one of your jobs as a PCT is to create a healthy environmental safety for the patient. So any trip hazards, any hazards, obstacles, darkness, where the rooms are always light, so if you go into the room, it's completely dark, you probably want to go ahead and turn on the night light so the patient doesn't trip and fall when they go into the restroom, okay? To prevent falls, they have the bands of fall risk, prevent falls, raise up the side railings on the bed, make sure, don't leave them down when you leave the patient, raise up the side railings so they don't fall. Educate the patient, right? especially if they're new to a walker or a cane. It would be your job as a PCT to educate them on how to walk on that. Crutches, the same way. Educate them on how to walk on crutches. We'll learn this. We'll do it skill-wise, okay? And then here, OSHA. OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Hazard. OSHA is responsible for everything safety. Remember that. That's a test sort of type question. That when you have OSHA, they're involved in like the sharps containers, the red bags, anything doing with patient safety. They're involved with it. Okay. Biohazards, chemical spills. You have what's called Material Safety Data Sheets, MSDS. And before, I forget when they actually took the books away, but before, what you would have is you would have a big yellow binder. And it says MSDS on it. And if you had any sort of chemical in your work area, then they would have that material safety data sheet in that book. So if you had isopropyl alcohol, they would have an MSDS sheet on isopropyl alcohol or a cleaning solution. They would have that there in case you got it in your eyes or swallowed it, or on your hands or something. You would know what to do with it, right? You'd know the emergency care. Now it's all online. There's no more big yellow books. Everything's online right now. But the wipes that you use to clean the beds in those white containers, okay, those have an MSDS sheet online to them. You're supposed to wear gloves with those because they're carcinogenic. I mean, they get too much exposure causes cancer. So you wear gloves when you're wiping down the bed, right? With those wipes, and then you leave a dwelling time. They're supposed to stay on there 3 to 4 minutes on the dwelling time. Wet. Visibly wet. So all that's OSHA. The MSDS sheets, body fluids, anything with worker safety, anything with radiology, x-rays, okay, high voltage equipment, electrical equipment, okay, fire extinguishers, evacuation routes, like our evacuation route that's on the door here. That would be in a hospital, that would be an OSHA requirement. Okay. Fines. OSHA, when OSHA finds somebody, they fine people in the tens of thousands of dollars. Okay? So that's something to be aware of. We have the wet signs. When the floor's wet, they have the little signs out that says wet floor. That's something that OSHA does as well. So your job as a PCT would to keep your patients safe, comply to the OSHA regulations, and keep your patients safe. All right? And speaking of fire, we should know this from the hospital orientation, right? So I hope the king's not in there. But he's toasty if he does. But RACE, that acronym, as a student and as an employee, they expect you to know that. Don't be surprised if they, in the hospital setting, they come up and they give you this red sort of siren, this red light that circles around. When they practice a fire drill, I've seen it with the student. They do that. They'll give them the thing, and they ask them, what are they supposed to do during a fire? Race and pass is what you have to remember. The expectation, you as a student, they expect you to know that. As a PCT, an employee, they really expect you to know that. Okay? That would be a big ding against them if you didn't know this as an employee. It would be re-education as a student, but as an employee, somebody would get chewed on. Okay? So rescue, if there's any patients here, if you can safely rescue them. Alarm, activate by pulling the fire alarm. Okay? The people doing the test may physically want you to pull the fire alarm. If you have a bunch of administrators around you and they say, pull the fire alarm, you're going, really? Yeah, pull the fire alarm. It's okay. They've already contacted the fire department telling them we're having a drill. So do as they say, pull the fire alarm. Okay? Contain the fire. All the doors are fire doors, so contain the fire, and then evacuate, or extinguish and evacuate if necessary. So if it's safe for you to go get a fire extinguisher, then put the fire out. Okay? Pass is how you would operate the fire extinguisher. Pull the pin, right? Aim it at the base of the fire. Squeeze the handle and then sweep at the base of the fire. Very easy. The stuff in the fire extinguisher suffocates, takes the oxygen out of it, and suffocates it. So remember, race, and pass, and that should be old information for you. Okay, just a little review. The Joint Commission, I think they were in the hospital over the break because the EMT students saying they were a little jumpy in the ER. The Joint Commission is the people who inspect the hospital. So the hospital inspectors are usually from the Joint Commission, and these are the guys who will shut the hospital down. They can literally, OSHA and Joint Commission can shut the hospital down. So they get real picky about these things when these inspectors come through. Okay? This is how they stay in business, by being accredited. Is that a word? Yeah. Accredited through the Joint Commission. If they lose their accreditation, they lose all their Medicare funding. So they go out of business. They'll go out of business without Medicare funding. Okay? Government funding. So they take this really serious from Joint Commission. Us as students, they really don't want you in the department. Like the lab Joint Commission was going through the lab one day, and they sent the student back saying, "Hey, Joint Commission's here. We really don't want the students." Right? It's just one more piece of the puzzle that they don't want to have to deal with. Right? I don't blame them. Usually the ER won't boot you, but most places will say, "Hey, let's just wait till Joint Commission leaves," right? Because you're responsible for the same information as the employee is while you're in the hospital, safety-wise. Okay? And there's policies on different things with hostages. You would just note that if you got into that circumstance, you would just know what your policy would be. Okay? Anything work-related injuries, work-related accident with you or with the patient, you would report that to the charge nurse, to the nurse. So if you had a patient, they got out of bed and they slipped and fell, just don't pick them up, put them back in bed and tell the patient, don't be quiet about that. That's our secret, right? Yeah, that'd get you fired. That's a career. That's a job ender right there. Okay, just go. And you'll have to write the report, make the report, inform the charge nurse. Okay, you'll probably leave the patient on the floor until the nurse evaluates the patient, right? So something like that. I mean, anything that you can think of, accident-wise, you would report it to the nurse. Okay. As far as in life, and as far as test questions are concerned, work-related injuries. You're moving the patient, you sort of tweak your back. Report that. Go ahead and report it. You have to fill out all the paperwork on it, but it's worth reporting, because if it gets worse, they'll want to know that, and there's a certain number of hours that you have to report that. I think it's like 24 hours. You have to report that through your chain of command within 24 hours, or you're responsible for the injury. Okay. All right. So, what to do with your nice PCT book is put this in your rotation on studying this. Okay. So every once in a while, go back to the beginning. If you're like me, See how I highlighted everything? Go back through as you read this. It's imperative that you read this, okay, and study it and highlight it for the PCT exam. Put this in your rotation as far as your study time to go back through. It's simple information, right? So go back through and just make sure that we keep up. We're going to do some questions on it and different things at different times, okay, to help you. But it's your certification. So you want to make sure that you're keeping up with the study part of it, okay? Good?
Good.
Where's that put us? Oh, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, they're part of this too. They're in there with OSHA. We learned this from very early on in the year that the chain of infection. That's important that you know it. So you want to make a note. Know the chain of infection, okay? So, and how to break the chain of infection. So we have the germ, and then this guy touches the doorknob, the port of entry. He touches the doorknob, and then he chews or gets his hands up near the mouth or nose or something that has a port of entry, right? And then it's transmitted through there, and then you're the host, right? CDC also controls the biohazards, the thing, and always remember the best way to prevent you from getting sick or spreading disease is what? Wash your hands. During the cold and flu season, your hands should be as dry as mine. Okay? I wash my hands a lot and avoid getting these things up near your face. That's how you stay healthy. Right?
So is everyone in these exams class?
Yes.
And is it like over everything from last semester, like?
Yes. Up to emergency reactions.
Okay. Is it the exact same test?
No.
Can it please be?